Arlan Hamilton is the founder and managing partner of Backstage Capital and has raised more than $12 million to back 150 companies led by underrepresented founders. Let's watch Arlan in conversation with moderator Natasha Mascarenhas. This was recorded a couple of days ago.
Hey everyone, I am Natasha Mascarenhas, and today we are going to talk about the super simple and not at all complicated question and theme, which is finding the next unicorn. Jokes aside, we have one of the best in the business to help us navigate that topic. We have Arlan Hamilton, the founder and managing partner of Backstage Capital. Arlan, it's super great to talk face-to-face instead of just in the DMs.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. As the whole event around TC Sessions Justice will itch at is this one will be all about how to help founders better understand how you invest and kind of the state of investing from your eyes. I wanted to start with a very simple question, which is how you've been able to find focus in this year. It feels like the hottest time in venture and early stage startups. So, in a world of invite only apps and Twitter drama every day, I'm really curious how you find yourself focusing on what kind of startups to back.
Yeah, it's a great question. I just don't engage in FOMO. I just don't have that same need to be on everything early and first and be everywhere. So I like to watch people kind of run around and ask for invites and things like that, but it's just not as important to me. It's just a strategy of like keeping myself calm, because there's always a VIP to the VIP section. There's always a further. And I find some of it quite distracting. I think it helps just to know where I was just a few years ago and to know kind of what's important, or trying to hopefully, keep tabs of what's important and not get caught up in any hype anytime. And I think that serves me well when I'm making investment decisions too, because people who interview me or want insights from me, they are always asking me about trends and what am I seeing and what are the trends out there? And I just don't know the trends. We're kind of counterintuitive and dancing to the sound of a different beat anyway. So I think that's all helpful when we're looking at companies and finding things in different places.
Yeah, I mean, you've invested in over 170 companies to date, if I'm getting the number right. I'm sure it's grown.
Right. No, that's right.
All right, perfect. One of my favorite things you did in the early days, which was write that Arlan Hamilton invests in 100 companies by 2020, and accomplishing it by 2018 was pretty badass as well.
Thank you.
I think one thing that you guys do differently, obviously, is this explicit focus on underestimated founders. But I would love for you to maybe walk me through some of the signals you look for from those founders, because I'm guessing some of them are first-time founders who don't have 3 exits to Google in their resume already.
That's right. Because, if you look at venture in general, a lot of funds who performed really, really well in their first fund don't necessarily perform as well in their second, third, fourth funds. So if you look at it from that perspective, going more micro, investing only in companies that have had successful founders in the past is not necessarily the best tack either, because what if that founder was just they found lightning in a bottle? And yes, they did an amazing thing before, but what if that doesn't translate to the next thing that they're going to do? And by the same token, what if someone who has all of the makings of the next tech titan is just being overlooked because it's not what people are used to seeing? It's not that pattern matching that they're so used to, and they're just being overlooked. And it kind of keeps me up at night to think about what do you miss by just assuming that everyone there's some magic pattern that creates the perfect founder. So I try to instill this at Backstage, and I think all of us are really, really good at this, is just like, let's look at things through a different angle, a different lens.
Are there any, maybe surprising things you look for when you're talking to founders? I know you kind of just said that there's no perfect pattern, but when you think about your Backstage portfolio companies, what are some things that you think unifies them and makes them make sense as a portfolio company versus a startup you think is pretty cool?
Yeah, and we see a lot of pretty cool startups, so it is difficult. We invest in about 2% only of what we see, which is a difficult task. We're not always going to get it right, and we also, when we say no to a company, it absolutely does not mean that they shouldn't be invested in. So the signaling is a little tough for us just because of how outspoken we are. But I think, there are many through lines when I think about the founders and the teams that they have. I think a lot of the founders they're from different walks of life. They have different education backgrounds, different regions, different industries, because we are agnostic. But there's always this determination mixed with kind of a logic and a purpose that is fueled by not just passion, because I think passion is overused, but it's fueled by this this unyielding grit that is just hard to create in someone. And when you think about that and you put it next, juxtaposed against other portfolios, where maybe all of the founders went to Stanford, or something in that same vein. There are, and that's, first of all, I should say that doesn't mean that every founder who went to Stanford didn't have something that they overcame, right? Like, let's be serious with it. But honestly, there's just so much that I see in other people that I saw in myself when I started Backstage, which is this grit, this determination. I think of a founder is a magical combination of passion and focus. They can do anything, because the passion, or other words that mean passion, that fuels this rocket ship. If you have that focus that you can dial in on where you're going, and you have both, it's really, really interesting. And not everybody has that. So there's this, I think we are pattern matching, for being honest, but we're just pattern matching from a different pattern.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite questions to ask founders when I interview them is, why would you be a founder when the odds are so against you?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a slightly joking question, but it's also consistently something that surprises me, and a reason why I would not be able to do it. It's just, failure is the conversation.
Yeah.
Forever.
And many of the founders in our portfolio, they're really lock in step with their companies, their product, their service. You talk about founder product fit. We have that in spades. It's because so many founders, I think I'm going to compare it. I hope I don't mess up the comparison or confuse people more. But I'm gay, and Soup's gay. And if my wife and I wanted to have a child, there would be a lot that goes into that. There's no accidental pregnancy with us. And so many people, in the same boat. It's almost like that with underrepresented, underestimated founders. Like, they have so much to lose, I think. They don't have a second and a third and a fourth chances that afforded to them. And so a lot of times you'll see companies that are built from such authenticity and such genuine concern about a problem that they're trying to solve, rather than so many companies I see elsewhere that are, how do we get rich the fastest way we possibly can? And that doesn't always set you up with the right recipe for success.
No, I think that was a great comparison. I think, you've been doing it for 4 years, but, let's definitely address the fact that 2020 was the outlier no one could even prepare for. And I would love to know how you vetted for those things, whether it be authenticity or founder fit with a company, how you did that all over Zoom, or if you guys found a different way to do it. I would love to know what that process has looked like 12 months later.
Yeah, we celebrated our 5th year anniversary on September 15th of 2020. So still getting started. We're just getting started, we think. We as a team have always been a remote team. And we would, before COVID hit, we would meet up probably 4 times a year and find a way to meet up with each other. Usually it was a small team, then it got bigger, And so we were able to, with everything else that rocked us and rocked the world last year and the last year that's happened, we at least had that going for us, that we were not so caught so flat-footed when it came to like having to change everything. And so we spend time together. We have co-working spots, and so we've done it that way. But we really were, it was different team members, usually meeting one-on-one, sometimes together, meeting with people all over the country, and then coming back and sharing that information with the group. And so we just brought that online. We kept the multiple tier conversation process that we have, where any investor at Backstage can bring in a company that they're interested in, or that comes to us, can have a one-on-one and then say, okay, this is someone I want you to meet more of. And there's like 3 tiers to it. They'll bring it into, add one more person to the conversation, and then eventually add us all to the conversation. And so that was actually remarkably easy to do in a year that was so difficult. And I think we've made, I want to say, almost 30 investments in the past 12 months. So we didn't slow down one bit. That's pretty much been our year. Every year has been about 30 companies, and we hit that this time as well. So if anything, it made the process more streamlined. And when you're talking about like, how do you pick up on things and how do you know for sure? I don't think you don't know until you know. I don't think you know, even if you have dinner with someone, even if you go visit them at their company, they're putting their best foot forward anyway. And you can do a lot of diligence behind the scenes. You can talk to people they've worked with. You can do all sorts of diligence that helps with that. But you really have to kind of have conviction and faith and a belief in yourself that you're making the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned 30 companies, and the fact that you only accept 2% of them, of the companies you see. I think it's the juxtaposition with that and the fact that funding for female founders has slowed this year, and that funding towards underestimated and underrepresented groups has slowed in some ways this year, that feels so jarring. And so I don't want to ask you, how do we fix this? But I do want to ask you, your reaction to that kind of lost momentum, if you thought that it was ever momentum to begin with, when you see the numbers now.
Yeah, I just I may be reading the numbers wrong, but anecdotally, I'm seeing at least when it comes to people of color, I'm seeing more deals getting done. There are certainly funds who got real quick on the excuses. I can't make a new investment. I can't invest in anybody I haven't met already. They got really quick on that. But you saw so many successful funds, so many well-known funds figure it out and really start making it, keep that momentum going. Because if you really want something to happen, you make it happen, especially these venture capitalists. I mean, it's the most competitive people I know. And so I think it was a lot of excuses. The numbers have always been abysmal. They've always been embarrassing. They've always been insulting. And I did see the numbers where the number of women-led companies has shrunk, that have been funded has shrunk. And I think it's unacceptable. And we should all feel ashamed about it, I mean, the people who are doing something about it, we keep doing something about it. We keep yelling about it. We keep talking about it. The people who are missing out and who are just being so blind to this, it's really on your shoulders to figure it out too. And there's so many people working on this who have the blueprint. If you can't figure it out on your own, you have Allraise, you have Backstage, you have all these companies and organizations who are trying to do the work for you. And eventually what's going to happen is what I've seen so much of. The same way people are leaving San Francisco in droves, they're going to leave the arena of venture capital in droves, because so many people have just said, I'm done trying to play that game. I'm going to bypass this altogether. I'm going to bootstrap. I'm going to crowdfund. I'm going to go with family offices. And venture capitalists don't have that same sway and that same importance that they once did. And you may not feel that today, but you feel it soon. And you're going to be the person who did not invest in Bumble. You're going to be the person who did not invest in XYZ. So it's at your own peril that you keep being blind to this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said, the like non-traditional financing, or just non-traditional is the wrong word, just non-venture capital financing feels more attractive to people these days. Like, how do you view your role as a VC changing 5 years from now, even as someone that backs underestimated founders? Like, does it mean going into different kinds of financing structures? Or do you see yourself always sticking in venture capital as the asset class you prefer?
Oh, yeah. I love that question. I've always said this. I've said, I don't know if people pay much attention to it, but I've always said that venture capital was the tool. It was the mechanism for which I could get in. I couldn't be an angel investor, couldn't do all these things, but I could earn and learn my way in to venture capital. I've never been beholden to it. I've always said too that I don't know what the future holds, but I think maybe there's another asset class that gets born, and we would certainly be part of that if that's the case. I just think it's a broken system. I think it's an old system that is. That has a lot that needs to be fixed. And again, it's like the people are kind of living in a fantasy world of they're in their heyday with this. Those years have gone. So there's so much ahead of us. It's funny how ironic it is that we are supposed to be investing in such innovation and the future and being on the cutting edge of things. And venture capital is so years back, so stunted in what it's doing. So I think just the way that I came in, I'll probably pivot or Backstage will find ways. We've already started. I mean, if you look at the raise that we did on Republic recently, that we're still, you could still be part of. It's an interesting thing. It didn't exist the way that we wanted it to exist, this ability to go to the crowd as a fund. And we trailblazed and made a way. We made a path. And I think that's what founders are doing. We were just inspired by founders who are making a way for themselves left and right.
Yeah. And, for people who don't know, Backstage did raise a community-led fund on Republic in a crowdsourced sort of fashion. And to me, like, the question I wanted to ask you about that raise was, how do you think raising from a community changes the way you find that next unicorn or back that next first-time founder versus how it looks when you rely on institutional LPs? Is it fundamentally different?
Yeah. I think we're going to have to work hand in hand, at least for now, until or unless, or I guess I should say, until I become independently wealthy, and I'm not being facetious. I think there's a time where I do become the LP. But until then, I do think we have to play in a field where institutionals are involved. I just think this proved out. I mean, and I should make it clear, this was not for a fund. This was for the operations entity of Backstage. So I want to make that clear. But it for so many years, we had been beholden to, you need to raise a large fund and then you need the management fee to pay for your operations to keep you in business. And every single year, we found a different way to do that by necessity. It's been so difficult to raise. And this time, the crowd comes into play. That's a grand and a great responsibility to have thousands of people who are looking to you and looking for updates and wanting you to win, but also watching, right? And so I wouldn't have it any other way. I'd much rather have 5,000 people get a few extra bucks every year and be part of this than to watch one or two institutionals just get fatter. It's just not as exciting. So the institutionals are going to have to compete with the crowd now. And that is where things get really, really interesting.
You kind of hint at this, but kind of the last question I wanted to ask was, what is giving you hope right now? There's so much doom and gloom and annoying and abysmal statistics. So what are you kind of latching on to hope?
The individual in the crowd. So these founders who are not going to give up because of what the trends say, or the fact that the macro is kind of terrible. So the individual willpower of people, and then the crowd, when they get together, what change can happen. And we see that day in and day out in different ways. And with this raise, like I said, is a great example of that.
Thank you so much, Arlan, for joining. That flew by, but everyone can find you on Twitter at Arlan Was Hair, and join us for the rest of Justice Sessions. Thanks again, Arlan.
Thank you.
Now we're going to take a look at the state of gig workers, independent contractors, and warehouse workers. For this panel, you can get your questions answered via Slido. Now, please welcome your panelists. Vanessa Bain with Gig Workers Collective, Jessica Martinez with the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health, and Christian Smalls of the Congress of Essential Workers. And I'll be moderating this one.